My son kicked me out of the company to make it happen. But when he realized his mistake, he fell to his knees and begged me. What I did shocked him. My name is Eleanor Carter. I am 68 years old, and for most of my life, I have dedicated every waking hour to something that meant everything to me. My family and the company my late husband, Robert, and I built from the ground up. Carter Construction was our legacy. We started small back in the 80s with just a handful of workers and a dream. Through blood, sweat, and tears, we grew it into a name people recognized in our small town. But now, as I sit here, reflecting on all that we've accomplished, I wonder how it all went wrong. It wasn't a competitor that took it from me. It wasn't the economy or the market. It was my own son, my flesh and blood, who stripped away everything I worked for in a matter of seconds. He kicked me out of the company I spent my entire life building, and at that moment, I couldn't even recognize him anymore. It all started with Jack, my son. He's 42 now, but he's always been headstrong. From a young age, he wanted to take control, to forge his own path. I always told him he had big shoes to fill, but I never once doubted that he could do it. I believed in him with all my heart. And that's why, when Robert passed away 5 years ago, I thought it was time to pass on the company to him. It was supposed to be his inheritance, his legacy. The plan was simple. I'd guide him, and eventually, he'd take over Carter Construction. But the reality of it all was far from simple. Jack's ambition grew faster than I anticipated. I began to notice it in little ways at first. His dismissive attitude toward my suggestions, his impatience when I took too long to make a decision. He would cut me off in meetings, making executive decisions without consulting me. It wasn't that I didn't trust him, but I had been running this company for over 30 years. I knew things he couldn't possibly understand yet. Experience counts for something, doesn't it? Then came the day I'll never forget. It was a typical Monday morning, and I was at my desk, reviewing the new project proposals for the upcoming quarter. Jack walked into my office, his face unusually serious, with a look in his eyes that told me something was different. "Mom," he began, his voice sounding more businesslike than usual. "We need to talk." I paused and set down my pen, sensing the weight of what was coming. "I think it's time we talk about the future of Carter Construction," Jack continued. "I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've made a decision." I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew something was coming that I wasn't going to like. "Mom, I'm going to take over the company. I'm going to run things my way," he said bluntly. I stared at him, shocked, confused. "What do you mean, take over? I've been running the company for years. This is my business. Your father and I built it from the ground up. I've earned this." Jack shook his head. "I know you have, Mom, but that's exactly the problem. It's your way of doing things that's holding us back. We need fresh ideas, new blood. I can't keep running this company like it's still the 80s. We need to modernize. I need to take charge." I felt a rush of anger and disbelief flood over me. "You can't just throw me out of the company, Jack. This is everything I've worked for. Everything your father and I built." Jack's expression hardened. "I'm not throwing you out, Mom, but you're not the right person to lead this company anymore. It's my turn to make it happen." I sat there, stunned, unable to speak. The words he said cut through me like a knife. My own son, my flesh and blood, was telling me I wasn't good enough. The company I had spent decades building, the legacy I had dedicated my life to, was now being handed over to someone who had never experienced the struggles it took to get here. I couldn't believe it. Jack stood up and walked out of the office, leaving me alone with the reality that everything was changing. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't prepared to hand over the reins just yet. But Jack was determined, and I had no choice but to watch him take control. I stared at my desk for a long time after Jack left. I couldn't believe what had just happened. He was my only son, the one I had sacrificed everything for. And yet here he was telling me that my time was over. I had spent my life building this company, and now I was being told that I didn't belong in it anymore. For the next few days, I tried to come to terms with what had happened. I didn't know where to turn. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I had spent years building something with my husband, and now, in the blink of an eye, it was being torn away. Jack's decision wasn't just a business move, it was personal. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had betrayed me, that the son I had nurtured, raised, and trusted had turned his back on me. And for what? To prove he was capable? To prove he was better than me? The company was my life, and now I had nothing. Nothing but the cold, empty feeling of betrayal. The days after Jack's announcement were a blur of disbelief and anger. I didn't know what hurt more, the way he kicked me out of my own company, or the look of determination in his eyes when he told me it was his turn. As the days dragged on, I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest, the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers, that my life's work was crumbling before me. The reality was hard to accept, but there it was. My son had taken everything from me. I spent my mornings in the house we built together, staring at the empty office that used to be mine. The phone never rang with the usual calls, and when I tried to reach out to clients, I was met with cold responses. It was clear that Jack's decision was not just affecting me, it was affecting the entire business. At first, I told myself that maybe Jack was right. Maybe it was time for him to take over. He had always been the more ambitious one, the one who wanted to change things, to make things better. But I didn't know if he was ready. No one can understand the weight of responsibility until they've actually carried it. So, I watched from the sidelines, helpless as he made mistake after mistake. I wanted to call him, to tell him that he was going down the wrong path, but I didn't. I couldn't. The pride in me, the part of me that refused to admit defeat, wouldn't let me. It was late one evening, a few weeks after Jack took over, when I received a call from one of our oldest clients, Mr. Parker. Carter Construction had been handling some of his biggest projects for over 20 years. "Eleanor," he said, his voice sounding troubled, "I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I need to talk to you about Jack. The last few projects he's been overseeing haven't been up to par, and it's starting to affect our reputation. I don't know what's going on, but I'm beginning to have doubts." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had heard whispers before, but hearing it directly from Mr. Parker made it real. I sat in silence, trying to form a response. "I'll make sure to speak with Jack," was all I could say, though I knew that my son's pride would never allow him to admit failure. But I also knew one thing. If things didn't change soon, we could lose everything. A few days passed, and the cracks in Jack's leadership grew more apparent. The office was chaotic. Employees didn't seem to know their roles, contractors were confused, and the deadlines we once met so easily were being missed. Jack's focus was all over the place. He was trying to prove himself, but in the process he was destroying everything Robert and I had built. One evening, as I walked past the office, I saw Jack on the phone, his voice raised in frustration. I knew he was under pressure, but I also knew that the pressure he was feeling was self-inflicted. He hadn't listened to anyone, not me, not his father, and certainly not the people who had helped him get where he was. I stood there for a moment, watching him, trying to decide whether to intervene. He looked different from the son I raised, more stressed, more desperate. He had changed, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had failed him somehow. Had I sheltered him too much? Had I been too protective, too eager to shield him from the struggles of leadership? "Mom, what are you doing here?" Jack's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked at him, startled, before quickly recovering. "I just came to see how you were doing," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time I'd spoken to him like that since he took over, and it felt almost unnatural. "I'm fine, Mom," he said quickly, but his tone was defensive, his eyes darting away from mine. "I'm just dealing with a few things." "It's fine, Jack," I began, but then stopped myself. What was I doing? I wasn't his mother anymore, not in this place. In his eyes, I had become an obstacle, a relic of the past. "I don't need your help, Mom." "I'm fine," he repeated, his words sharp and dismissive. I stood there, my heart breaking. The son I knew, the one who once looked up to me, was no longer the same. The pride in his voice was not the kind that came from a place of confidence. It came from arrogance, and I was no longer welcome in his world. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. The company continued to spiral, and Jack's frustration only grew. The employees were miserable, contractors were leaving, and the clients were no longer trusting us. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I decided to visit the old office, the one I used to run. It still had my touch, my style, my presence. As I walked through the empty halls, memories of better times flooded back. I could almost hear Robert's voice, his laugh echoing in the halls. He was always there, always helping me make the right decisions, always knowing what to do. But now there was nothing but silence. It was there, standing in front of the desk I used to occupy, that I made my decision. I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't let Jack destroy everything. I had to try. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. I called Jack's office. "Jack, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "Come to the office. I need to discuss something important with you." When Jack arrived, he looked weary, as though the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. He didn't speak at first, his eyes avoiding mine, until I broke the silence. "Jack," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "This company is falling apart under your leadership. You need help. You can't do this alone." He looked at me, his face conflicted. For a moment, it seemed as if he wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. He took a deep breath and finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. I didn't know how bad things were. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could prove myself, but now, I don't know what to do." I watched him, my heart aching. This was the son I once knew. The man who had tried to push me out of his life was now on his knees, asking for my help. And I could see in his eyes that he knew he had failed. As the weeks passed, things at Carter Construction continued to deteriorate. Jack was in over his head, and no matter how hard he tried to steer the company, it felt like everything he touched was falling apart. I could see the stress in his eyes every time I saw him, and the arrogance that once defined him was now replaced by frustration and regret. The company, once thriving, was losing contracts left and right. Our biggest clients were pulling out, and the employees, who had once been loyal, were beginning to question whether they should stay. Carter Construction, the legacy I had spent my entire life building, was slowly being reduced to nothing. And Jack, the son I had hoped would carry it forward, was struggling to keep it afloat. I had been silent for so long. I had watched him fail and made the painful decision not to intervene. But now it was clear that he was sinking, and if I didn't do something, everything we had worked for would be lost. One evening, after a particularly bad day in the office, I sat by the window, gazing out at the fading light of the setting sun. I could hear the distant sounds of traffic and the hum of the world going on, while inside, our world was falling apart. Jack had reached out to me a few times, but his pride wouldn't let him fully admit that he needed me. Then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was important. I picked it up quickly, and to my surprise, it was Jack. "Mom!" His voice was hoarse, almost broken. "Can we talk? I don't know what to do anymore. I'm sorry. I've made a mess of everything." I could hear the desperation in his voice, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe my son was finally ready to admit his mistakes. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but I could feel my heart racing. I knew this moment would come, but I wasn't prepared for the vulnerability in his voice. "I'm at the office," he replied. "Can you come here?" I didn't hesitate. I put on my coat and drove to the office. The drive was quiet, almost too quiet. I thought back to all the times Jack had looked up to me, all the moments I had spent teaching him about responsibility, about leadership, about how to build something that lasts. I wondered if that part of him still existed. When I arrived, I found Jack sitting at his desk, his head in his hands. The room felt heavy, the air thick with failure. This wasn't the son I remembered. The man in front of me looked broken, defeated. I walked toward him slowly, unsure of what to say, but knowing that if I didn't speak now, I might lose him forever. "I don't know what I was thinking, Mom," Jack said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could do it. I thought I could prove myself. But I was wrong. I've lost everything, and now I'm just watching it slip away." I stood there for a moment looking at him. This was the son I raised. This was the man who, for all his flaws, still needed me. I had to make a choice. I could walk away, continue to let him drown in his mistakes, or I could step in and help him. I knew what I had to do, but part of me wanted to turn my back on him. He had hurt me in ways I never thought possible, and yet I couldn't bring myself to abandon him. "Jack," I began, my voice soft but firm, "this company is not just yours to destroy. It's our legacy. Your father and I worked so hard to build it. You can't just throw it away like this." "I know, Mom," Jack said, his voice breaking. I know, and I'm so sorry. But it's too late. I don't know how to fix it. I took a deep breath and walked over to him. This was the moment that would define everything. I could feel my emotions welling up inside of me. Anger, sadness, but also love. I placed my hand on his shoulder, and for a moment we sat in silence. Jack, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. It's not too late. We can fix this, but you have to accept that you can't do it alone. You've been so focused on proving something to the world that you've forgotten why we do this in the first place. It's about the people who depend on us, the families who rely on us, and the legacy we're leaving behind. Jack lifted his head, his eyes red from the tears he had been holding back. I don't know where to start, Mom. I don't know how to get us back on track. You start by admitting that you need help, I said, my voice unwavering. You start by listening, not just to me, but to the people who've been with this company since the beginning. You start by understanding that being a leader means more than making decisions. It means being there for the people who follow you. Jack looked at me for a long moment, and then slowly he stood up. His hands were shaking as he wiped his face. I don't deserve your help, he muttered. No, I replied, stepping back and crossing my arms. You don't, but you're my son and I love you. And I will help you, but only if you're willing to listen and learn. There was a long silence before Jack finally nodded. The man I had raised was back. He wasn't perfect, but he was willing to admit his mistakes, something I had always hoped he would. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, his voice full of determination. I don't want to lose everything. I don't want to lose this company. I don't want to lose you. I looked at him, a mixture of pride and sadness in my heart. Then we'll rebuild it together. But understand this, Jack. It's not just the company we're rebuilding. It's our relationship, too. And that's going to take time. When I agreed to help Jack, it wasn't a decision I made lightly. A part of me still wanted to walk away, to leave him to fix the mess he had made. But another part of me, the part that loved him unconditionally, the part that was still his mother, knew that I couldn't abandon him. Not now. Not when he needed me the most. The following days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late nights at the office. Carter Construction was far from stable. The once thriving business had become a shadow of what it used to be. The workers were disheartened, the clients were nervous, and the partners who had trusted us for years were beginning to question whether they had made a mistake by staying with us. Jack was trying. I saw the effort he was putting in, the long hours he was spending trying to pick up the pieces, but it was clear that he didn't have the experience to pull it all together. And while I could see the desperation in his eyes, I knew that he had to be taught a lesson, one that he wasn't going to learn until he truly understood the weight of leadership. One afternoon, Jack and I sat down in the conference room. It was one of those rare moments when everything seemed quiet, and I had the space to think. The tension between us was palpable, and I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever be the same between us. He looked at me, his face weary but determined. I've been thinking a lot, Mom. About everything, he said, his voice low. I know I screwed up. I know I made some terrible decisions, and I didn't listen to you. But I'm trying. I really am. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Jack, it's not just about trying. It's about understanding what went wrong. He was silent for a moment, his eyes on the table. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was ready. But I wasn't. I thought if I just took charge, things would get better. But all I've done is make everything worse. I felt a wave of sympathy for him. But sympathy wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to save the company, and it certainly wasn't going to repair the damage done to our relationship. I had to be firm. I had to make him see the bigger picture. Jack, I began, my voice steady, this company is not just yours to play with. You've thrown away years of hard work, years of trust. Your father and I built this from nothing. You need to stop thinking about making it happen and start thinking about how to fix what's broken. Jack's expression hardened. I get it, Mom. But what do you want me to do? Just sit back and let you run everything again? I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not going to be your assistant. I want to lead. I could hear the defensiveness in his voice, and for a moment, I thought about how far we had come and how far we still had to go. Leadership wasn't about controlling everything. It was about knowing when to step back, when to listen, when to let others guide you. You can't lead if you don't know how to listen, I said, my voice calm but firm. I've been doing this for over 30 years, Jack. I've made mistakes too, but I've learned from them. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about knowing when to take advice and when to trust the people around you. Jack stood up abruptly. I don't need advice. I need control. I need to fix this company, and I can't do that if you're always in my way. His words cut me like a knife. This wasn't the son I raised. The one I knew would listen, would understand the value of family and hard work. This was a stranger, a man consumed by his own ambition, too proud to accept that he couldn't do it alone. Jack, I said, standing up, my voice shaking with emotion. You don't understand. It's not about control. It's about trust. And you need to earn that trust back. I won't let you ruin everything I've built just to prove something to yourself. Jack's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. But instead, he clenched his fists and turned away, his shoulders stiff with anger. I didn't ask for your help, he muttered, his voice bitter. I thought I could do this on my own. But if you think you can fix it, then fine. You do it. But don't expect me to thank you for it. I stood there watching him. I wanted to say more, to make him see the damage he was doing to himself and to the company. But I realized something important in that moment. Jack wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to listen, and he wasn't ready to change. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about his future. You're right, I said, my voice low. You didn't ask for my help. But I'm not doing this for you, Jack. I'm doing it for Carter Construction. And I'm doing it for the people who depend on us. Jack didn't respond. He just stood there, his back to me, as if trying to shut me out. But the silence spoke volumes. He knew he was wrong, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. I left the office that day with a heavy heart. I had made my point, but I knew it wasn't over. Jack had a long way to go before he could truly take the reins of the company, and even longer before he could regain the respect he had lost. As the days went by, I tried to stay out of the way, allowing Jack the space to make his own decisions. But the weight of it all never left me. Every time I walked past the office, Every time I saw the empty chair where Robert used to sit, I felt the ghost of the past hanging over me. The days after my confrontation with Jack were heavy, like the air before a storm. I knew what had to be done, but I wasn't sure I was ready for the consequences. The stubborn pride that had always defined my son seemed to be slowly suffocating him. And I'll admit, part of me felt like I was losing him all over again. The son I had raised, the one who looked up to me for guidance and wisdom, had turned into someone else. Someone who thought he knew better. Yet, no matter how much he pushed me away, I knew I couldn't abandon him. Jack had to learn the hardest lesson of all. Leadership wasn't about control, it was about humility and understanding. It was late one evening when the phone rang. The sound broke the silence in my house. I had been sitting in the dim light of the living room, staring at the empty space where Robert's chair used to be. The pain of his absence still lingered, and sometimes it felt like the walls of our home were closing in on me. "Mom!" Jack's voice was small, almost fragile, and I instantly recognized the desperation in it. I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading. "Jack, what is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. The company is falling apart, and I can't fix it." I felt a small sense of relief, mixed with the weight of my decision. This was the first time Jack had truly admitted his mistake. "I've been trying to prove something, Mom, and I thought I could do it, but I didn't realize how much I didn't know. Please, can you come? We need to talk." I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. My son was finally coming to me for help. For so long he had refused to ask for it, believing that he could do it alone. But now, after weeks of watching the company fall apart under his leadership, he finally realized that he needed someone to guide him. "All right," I said, my voice filled with resignation. "I'll be there in a few minutes." When I arrived at the office, Jack was waiting for me in his office, the door slightly ajar. The once thriving building that had been the heart of Carter construction now felt empty, hollow. The air was thick with tension, and the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights above. Jack looked up as I entered, his face a mixture of exhaustion and guilt. His usual confident demeanor was nowhere to be found. Instead, I saw a man who had been brought to his knees by his own arrogance. "Mom," he said quietly, standing up from his desk. "I've failed. I didn't listen to you, and now everything's falling apart." I nodded, walking over to where he was standing. "You've made mistakes, Jack. We all do. But the important thing is that you're finally admitting them." He sighed and sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. "I don't know where to start, Mom. Everything is a mess. The contracts are falling apart, the clients are pulling out, and I've lost the respect of the employees." I pulled a chair over and sat down across from him. For the first time in a long time, Jack seemed like the son I used to know. The one who would look to me for guidance, the one who trusted my experience. "Jack," I said gently, "you can't fix everything in a day. You have to stop trying to control everything. You've got to rebuild the trust, and you have to rebuild the foundation of this company." He looked at me, his eyes filled with doubt. "How do I do that, Mom? How do I fix all of this?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "You start by listening. You need to hear the people who are still here, the ones who believe in you and the company. You've got to show them that you're willing to learn, not just command. And most importantly, you need to trust yourself again." Jack swallowed hard, looking down at the desk. I could see the weight of it all pressing down on him. His pride, which had been his driving force, had turned into his biggest enemy. "I don't know if I can do that, Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do it alone," I replied softly. "I'm here. We'll do this together." For a moment there was silence between us. The weight of the past few weeks hung heavy in the room, but there was something else there too. Hope. I could see it in Jack's eyes, the realization that he couldn't continue on the path he was on. And for the first time in a long while, I saw the son I had raised. The one who cared about the people around him. The one who wasn't afraid to admit when he was wrong. Jack slowly stood up, and for the first time he walked over to me. He placed his hands on the edge of the desk, looking me in the eye. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I was so focused on proving myself that I forgot what really mattered." I stood up and walked over to him, placing my hand on his shoulder. "It's not too late, Jack. But it's going to take work. It's going to take trust. And it's going to take humility." Jack nodded. "I understand. And I want to make it right." "Good," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Let's get started." For the next few days, Jack and I worked together to slowly pull the company back from the brink. It wasn't easy. We had to rebuild relationships with clients, regain the trust of our employees, and reorganize the company from the inside out. But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was the emotional toll it took on both of us. Jack began to listen more, to seek advice when he needed it, and most importantly, he started to trust his team. He wasn't in control of everything anymore. He had learned that being a leader wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about listening, learning, and leading by example. And little by little, Carter Construction began to turn around. It had been a few weeks since Jack and I made the decision to rebuild the company together. The tension between us had slowly started to dissipate, but the work was far from over. We were both learning new things every day, Jack about leadership and me about letting go. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Every morning, I walked into the office with a sense of purpose. Carter Construction needed me. More than that, Jack needed me. He was still learning, still stumbling, but at least he was trying now. And for the first time in a long time, he was listening. Listening to me, to the employees, to the clients, something I hadn't seen in him in years. The first few projects we tackled together weren't easy. Jack was still full of ideas, ambitious ones, some good, others not so much, but at least he wasn't pushing them on everyone without considering the consequences. He would come to me, ask for advice, and listen intently as I spoke. The power had shifted, and it felt like things were starting to move in the right direction. But as is the case with any business, things weren't all smooth sailing. One day, we received a call from one of our biggest investors, James Bennett. He had been a supporter of our company for years, and his investment was crucial to the future of Carter Construction. His voice on the phone was tense, and I could feel the weight of the conversation before he even spoke. "Eleanor," he began, "I've been hearing troubling things about the company's direction. Jack's been making some changes, and I'm not sure they're the right ones. We need to meet. This can't wait." I glanced at Jack, who was sitting across from me, looking almost too eager to take the call. His eyes were wide, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. We couldn't afford to lose Bennett's support. Not now, not when we were finally starting to rebuild. But I had to be honest with Jack. "Jack, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. He nodded, and we walked to my office, leaving the rest of the staff to continue working. The weight of the conversation hung between us as I closed the door behind me. "Mom, do you think Bennett will pull out?" Jack asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. He was scared, something I hadn't seen in him for years. "I don't know, Jack," I said, sitting down at my desk. "But we can't afford to ignore this. We need to show him that we're serious about making the changes he's concerned about." Jack swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "I tried, Mom. I really did. But I can't fix everything. I can't make everyone happy." I sighed, my heart aching for him. He was still so young in this world of business. "Jack, it's not about making everyone happy. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. It's about being transparent, even when you're scared. You have to face the consequences of your decisions." I could see the doubt in his eyes, but also a flicker of realization. For the first time, Jack understood that leadership wasn't about avoiding consequences. It was about facing them head-on. The next day we met with Bennett. His office was a tall, sleek building, a far cry from the humble surroundings of Carter Construction. As we walked through the polished hallways, I could feel Jack's anxiety building. I gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, but I knew that this was a test for both of us. When we entered Bennett's office, he didn't waste any time. "Eleanor, Jack," he said, his voice sharp. "I've been following the changes happening at Carter Construction, and frankly, I'm concerned. Jack, I know you've got big ideas, but I'm not sure you've thought them through. You're taking risks that might sink us all." Jack opened his mouth to defend himself, but I stopped him with a gentle gesture. This was my chance to show him how to handle this. "James," I said calmly, "I understand your concerns, and I know that Jack has made some mistakes along the way, but we're committed to making things right. We're working hard to get this company back on track, and I promise you we'll get there. But we need your trust." Bennett looked between Jack and me, his gaze weighing our words carefully. The silence in the room was thick, the tension palpable. Finally, he nodded. "I'll give you one more chance," he said. "But you need to prove to me that Carter Construction is worth saving. I'm not in this business to throw good money after bad." I nodded, feeling the pressure lift just slightly off my shoulders. "We won't let you down, James. We'll prove it to you." The next few months were a whirlwind. Carter Construction slowly began to turn around, but it wasn't without its struggles. Jack and I worked side by side, rebuilding the relationships with our clients, strengthening our team, and refocusing our goals. We both had to swallow our pride at times, Jack by accepting help from others, and me by letting him take the lead in some areas. But something began to shift between us. Jack was becoming more confident, and I was starting to let go of the reins. It wasn't easy. I had been the one in control for so long, and letting go of that control felt like losing a piece of myself. But I knew it was the only way forward. And slowly, very slowly, the signs of recovery began to appear. One evening, as we were wrapping up a meeting with a new potential investor, I looked across the table at Jack. He had grown so much in such a short time. The arrogance that once defined him was now tempered by humility, and I could see that he was beginning to understand the true meaning of leadership. His maturity was starting to shine through. "You've done well, Jack," I said, my voice quiet but filled with pride. He looked at me, his eyes soft. "No, Mom, we've done well. I couldn't have done it without you." And in that moment, I knew that, despite everything we had gone through, we had found our way back to each other. Our relationship, though scarred, had healed. And our company? It was on the road to recovery. There were days when I felt as though I could breathe again, when the weight of the company seemed a little lighter, and Jack seemed a little more like the man I had always hoped he would be. But the truth was, we were still far from where we needed to be. The company's reputation was recovering, but our struggles were far from over. We had earned another chance, but now it was time to prove that we deserved it. Jack had grown, there was no doubt about that. His arrogance had been replaced with caution, his impatience with patience. But the real test was still ahead. Could we truly turn things around? Could Carter Construction not only survive but thrive again? That was when the call came. It was Bennett, our most significant investor. James Bennett, the man whose trust we had fought so hard to regain. I had been expecting the call, but when it came, I wasn't prepared for what he said. "Eleanor." Bennett's voice was tight, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something more urgent. "I've been keeping an eye on Carter Construction, but I'm afraid things still aren't up to par. I'm thinking of pulling out my investment unless we see a real turnaround in the next few months." I stared at the phone in my hand. This was the moment we had been working for, the moment Jack and I had been preparing for. If we didn't pass this test, the company could crumble, and all our progress would be for nothing. I glanced at Jack, who was sitting across from me, his face a mixture of exhaustion and determination. He knew this was coming. He had to know. This was the final test, the one that would determine if we could rebuild everything we had lost. "James," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "we're aware of the challenges we face, but I assure you we are committed to making things right. We're already seeing progress, and we have a plan to ensure that Carter Construction not only survives but thrives. Give us more time. We'll prove to you that we're worth the investment." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Bennett was a man of few words, and when he spoke again, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. "I'm not asking for promises, Eleanor," he said. "I need results. You've got 6 months. That's all I'm giving you. Either you show me that this company can bounce back, or I pull out, and I won't look back." I felt the weight of his words settle into my chest. 6 months. We had 6 months to turn things around. I hung up the phone and turned to Jack. His face had gone pale. 6 months. That was the ultimatum. "Mom!" Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "What are we going to do? 6 months isn't enough time to fix everything we've screwed up." I leaned forward, my hands resting on the table. "Jack, 6 months is plenty of time. But it won't be easy. We're going to have to work harder than we ever have before." He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with determination. I could see it. The same fire that had once burned so brightly, The same drive that had led him to make such reckless decisions in the past was now focused on something more meaningful: saving this company. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jack and I dove headfirst into action. We reorganized the office, reviewed every contract, and reached out to every client we had ever worked with. We made tough decisions that would determine the future of the company. There was no room for error. But even as we worked tirelessly, doubts crept in. 6 months. 6 months was all we had. I knew Jack was feeling the pressure more than anyone. It was one thing to want to prove himself. It was another to actually face the enormity of what he had to do. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and discussions, Jack and I sat in the conference room, our heads spinning with all the decisions we had made. The clock was ticking, and it felt like we were running out of time. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom," Jack admitted, his voice quiet. He had his hands in his hair, staring down at the table. "I feel like every step we take is one step closer to failure." I stood up and walked over to him, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Jack," I said softly, "this isn't just about you. This is about all of us, about everyone who's been part of this company. We've made mistakes, but we're still here. And as long as we're still standing, we have a chance." Jack looked up at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if it's not enough? What if Bennett pulls out anyway?" I smiled, a small but reassuring smile. "Then we'll deal with that when it comes. But we're not going to let fear stop us from doing everything we can to succeed. And neither are you." Jack didn't respond immediately, but I saw something in his eyes. A glimmer of resolve, the same spark I saw when he first started in the business. It wasn't the reckless ambition that had caused him to make so many mistakes. This time, it was the desire to prove not only to others but to himself that he could do this. The next 6 months were a blur of late nights, long discussions, and tireless efforts. We worked harder than we ever had before, and slowly the pieces began to fall into place. Jack learned to trust his team, and he learned to listen to their concerns. We brought back the old employees who had left, rebuilt our relationships with the clients, and pushed through the final stretch with everything we had. Bennett's deadline was looming, and I could feel the pressure mounting. But for the first time, I felt hopeful. One morning, as we were preparing for another critical meeting with potential investors, Jack walked into my office, his face calm but serious. "Mom," he said, "I think we did it. We've turned it around." I looked at him, the pride swelling in my chest. "Are you sure, Jack? We're not there yet." "I'm sure," he said. "The numbers are good. Our investors are happy. And Bennett, he's coming to meet with us next week." The day of the meeting, I stood in front of the conference room, waiting for Bennett to arrive. I was nervous, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I knew that no matter what happened, we had fought for this company, for this family. We had given everything we had, and that was enough. When Bennett walked in, his face was unreadable. He took a seat at the table, glancing over the reports Jack had prepared. "Well," he said, after what felt like an eternity, "I have to say I'm impressed. Carter Construction is back on track. The day we had been preparing for was finally here. Bennett was coming to see us, and everything we had worked for was riding on this moment. The pressure was overwhelming, but I couldn't afford to show it. Not now. Jack and I spent the morning making final adjustments to the presentation. We had all the numbers, all the reports, and all the data we could possibly need. But as I stood in the conference room with Jack, I couldn't help but feel a knot in my stomach. This was our chance, the moment where everything could either collapse or come together. Jack looked over at me, his face a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Mom," he said, voice low, "I've never been more scared in my life. What if he doesn't believe us? What if it's still not enough?" I placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to steady my own nerves. "Jack, we've done everything we can. We've worked harder than anyone else. And now it's just about showing Bennett what we've accomplished. We've turned this company around. Believe in that." He nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in his eyes. I understood. I had been through the same doubts myself. The door opened and Bennett walked in. He was as businesslike as ever, his face unreadable, his eyes scanning the room. He didn't waste any time. "Eleanor, Jack," he said, his voice sharp, "let's get to it. Show me what you've got." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. Jack stood up first, walking over to the projector to begin the presentation. As he spoke, I watched Bennett closely. He was quiet, not giving anything away, but I could see his interest. The numbers we had compiled showed significant improvement. Profits were up, contracts were being renewed, and the company's reputation was recovering. Jack went through the slides, explaining the steps we had taken to regain control of the company, the changes we had made, and the work we had done to rebuild trust with our clients. He was confident, no longer the man who had kicked me out of the company months ago. He had grown in front of my eyes. Bennett listened carefully, nodding occasionally. But when Jack finished, there was a long silence in the room. My heart was pounding in my chest. "Well," Bennett said after what felt like an eternity, "you've done better than I expected." Jack exhaled a breath he'd been holding in. "But it's still a long road ahead," Bennett continued. "You've made strides, but this company needs more than a quick fix. It needs to prove that it can stay consistent, that the changes you've made are sustainable. This isn't just about one successful quarter. You need to show me that you can handle the long-term challenges." My heart sank slightly. There was still more work to be done. But Bennett's words weren't as harsh as I had feared. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "I'm willing to give you another chance. 6 more months. But this time, if you can show me continued progress, I'll commit to long-term investment." I looked at Jack, and I could see the relief on his face. We had done it. The pressure wasn't completely off, but we had earned a reprieve. "Thank you, James," I said, my voice steady. "You won't regret it." He stood up, extending his hand to both of us. "I hope not," he replied, a slight smile crossing his face. "You've got your chance. Now make it count." As Bennett left, I turned to Jack. The weight of the past few months lifted from my shoulders. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt confident. "We did it, Jack," I said softly, looking at him with pride. "We got the chance we needed." Jack looked back at me, a sense of gratitude in his eyes. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I've learned so much from you these last few months. You've shown me what true leadership is. I couldn't have done this without you." I smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're ready now, Jack. It's your turn. But remember, leadership isn't about doing it alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help and knowing when to lead with humility. The relief of the meeting with Bennett still lingered in the air, but as the days passed, the reality of what lay ahead became clearer. 6 months. 6 months to prove that our efforts weren't just a temporary fix, that Carter Construction could thrive again. Not just in the short term, but for the long haul. I stood in the office late one evening, staring out the window at the city lights. The weight of the responsibility still sat heavy on my shoulders, but there was a newfound sense of determination in me. I had seen Jack grow in ways I hadn't expected. He was no longer the boy who tried to force his way through everything, but a young man willing to listen, to learn, and to rebuild. Jack walked into the office, his expression serious but hopeful. "Mom," he said, sitting down across from me, "we've got 6 months to prove Bennett wrong. We can't waste any time." I nodded, feeling the urgency. "I know. We'll keep working at it, Jack. But remember, we don't have to do it alone anymore. This company is built on teamwork. We've got a lot of good people who are willing to fight with us. Let's use them." The next few months were a mix of tension and progress. We stayed focused, pushing through the hardest parts. We were rebuilding relationships with clients, stabilizing our finances, and pushing for growth, all while ensuring that we didn't make the same mistakes as before. Jack was involved in every decision, making sure he didn't repeat his past mistakes. It was clear that he had learned the value of teamwork, trust, and consistency. But even with all the progress, I couldn't ignore the clock ticking. The pressure from Bennett's ultimatum was still there, weighing on us. I could see Jack starting to feel it, too. The late nights were taking their toll on him. One evening, as we were finishing up a meeting with a new client, Jack stayed behind in the conference room. He stared down at the table, his fingers tapping nervously. I walked in and sat next to him. "You all right, Jack?" He looked up, the exhaustion in his eyes evident. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am. But sometimes it feels like it's not enough." I placed a hand on his shoulder, offering the comfort I hadn't been able to give him in the past. "It is enough. We've come a long way. You've come a long way. We're not perfect, but we're getting there." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't want to let you down. I don't want to let everyone down." "You won't," I assured him. "We've already proven that we can do this. And in 6 months, we'll show Bennett that we're not just another company on the brink of failure. We're Carter Construction, and we're going to rise again." As the 6-month mark approached, our progress was undeniable. The company was no longer teetering on the edge. We had stabilized our finances, regained key clients, and had even brought in new projects. But more importantly, Jack was finally starting to believe in himself again. His confidence was grounded now, not in arrogance but in experience. When the day of the final meeting with Bennett came, I could see the nervousness in Jack's eyes. But he had changed. The man sitting across from me today was different from the one who had walked in that office months ago, full of self-doubt and overconfidence. Bennett walked into the conference room, his usual stern expression softened by a slight smile. "Eleanor, Jack," he said, "I've been keeping a close eye on Carter Construction. I have to admit, I was skeptical at first. But you've proven me wrong. Jack looked at me, a spark of pride in his eyes. We had done it. I'm happy to announce that I'll be increasing my investment in Carter Construction, Bennett continued. You've shown that you have the potential to thrive. You've got a long road ahead, but I believe you can make it. I glanced at Jack, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. We had made it. The 6 months we had spent rebuilding Carter Construction had been the most challenging and transformative of my life. Jack and I had come a long way, but I knew the true test was still ahead. Sustaining this newfound stability, ensuring the company's future, and more importantly, continuing to rebuild the trust between us. When Bennett increased his investment in the company, I felt a sense of relief. It wasn't just a financial victory, it was a recognition of our efforts, a validation of the hard work we had put in to restore Carter Construction to its former glory. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. Now, we had to prove that we could maintain the momentum we had gained. The day after the meeting with Bennett, Jack and I sat in the office, looking over the final reports. The numbers were good, better than they had been in years. Our clients were satisfied, and our team was motivated. But Jack knew as well as I did that complacency was our greatest enemy. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but thoughtful, "we've come this far, but we can't stop now. We've got to keep pushing forward." I nodded. "We've learned a lot, Jack. But remember, leadership isn't just about growth. It's about consistency. It's about staying true to our values no matter how big we get. That's what will keep us strong." Jack looked at me, a mixture of determination and gratitude in his eyes. "I get it now. I've learned that I can't do this alone. And I've learned that you can't just lead from the front. You have to lead by example." I smiled, proud of the man he was becoming. The journey had been long, but Jack was finally ready to take on the full responsibility of leading the company, and he knew that leadership was about more than just control. It was about integrity. Together, we would continue to build Carter Construction's legacy, brick by brick, with care, humility, and the lessons we had learned along the way.